Everybody is always questioning whether it's AI or employees. No, it's and. How do we use AI to make employee jobs easier? You can look at change in one or two ways. You can look at it as, oh, shoot, I'm scared about what's going to hit me. Or you could say, no, this is a great opportunity. I wake up every day, I can make somebody's life better or I can make somebody's life worse. And I don't care whether it's at the grocery store, holding a door, picking something up, giving them a cart, whatever it may be. You can make or break somebody every single interaction.
Today's guest is Steve Bandrowczak, a technology executive whose career has spanned more than 3 decades, including leadership roles at DHL, where we met 25 years ago, Lenovo, HP, and Xerox, where over the last 8 years at Xerox, Steve served as president, chief operating officer, and ultimately serving as CEO for the last 3 years. But what makes this conversation especially interesting is where Steve is today. After leading one of the world's most recognized technology companies, he's entering a completely new chapter, building an AI advisory practice, continuing to teach the next generation of technology thought leaders at Northeastern University, and like many of you might be today, evaluating for himself and for his clients where to leverage information and what actions to take that create the most value. This isn't a conversation about purely AI or corporate leadership. It's about reinvention, knowing when one chapter ends, and how to experienced leaders think about what they're going to build next. So, Steve, I'm super pumped to welcome you to the Parallel Entrepreneur.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for the invitation. And what a great time in our history to talk about large transformation and what technology is doing to industries and candidly what it's doing to the world at large.
You've submitted your resignation as CEO and you're off to the races in the AI universe. Um, let's talk a little bit about your time as the CEO. What was the greatest challenge?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was trying to do a very large transformation as a public company. A lot of the things that we were doing, if it was in a PE world, would have been a much easier in terms of how you raise capital, the outside concerns on the debt stack, the outside concerns on how fast you can move and get synergies as we were acquiring assets. And those things are a lot less pressure, short-term pressure in a non-public company, specifically a private company. So probably the hardest thing we're trying to do is do a reinvention. And when I mean reinvention, it literally was how do we take the position of Xerox and position it for growth, position it for long-term survival as a brand and as a company by reinventing itself. It wasn't just about transformation. It literally was a reinvention. And so that's probably the hardest part. Just, the patience of the outside shareholders, trying to do it in the public world and dealing with the short-term pressures of having to deliver on a quarter as you're trying to position the company for long-term survivability.
Over the course of the last, say, year, Xerox's stock had declined by 71%. And then you had been telling the street and telling, working through your leadership uh, team, the market will catch up with what we're
Yeah.
doing. So the market did catch up. You bounced 300% year to date. Um, and this is just such a fabulous report card. And you're now on the outside looking in. So I'm curious, what were the big challenges with IT Savvy and the Lexmark integration? And how did that play a role in your decision to move forward to another chapter?
Yeah, two different sides of the coin. IT Savvy was all about growth, was all about positioning Xerox for IT solutions, specifically around services and software as a service. And so the integration of IT Savvy was building a company that was a very different go-to-market motion, very different growth initiative for Xerox. And that was actually growing and is growing very, very nicely. The problem is a IT solutions company inside of the biggest Xerox was not getting the value and the multiple that I believe it should have gotten because it has such legs and such growth opportunity that if IT savvy was outside of Xerox, it would have had a much different valuation. So the first challenge with IT savvy is getting it integrated into the culture of Xerox and then growing and driving a different go to market. But more importantly, how do you convince the market and Xerox clients that we're growing this business? It's a much different Xerox going future and what it actually looks like. So that's one set of challenges. On the Lexmark side, it was how do we integrate as quickly as possible? How do we get the synergies between the two companies? We now were in the manufacturing space, which we were not previously. And so, how do we think about dealing with now a manufacturer? How do we deal with growing in a category of A4? A4 is the size of printer. How do we grow in a category that we hadn't grown before? Lexmark, now Xerox, provides engines and manufacturing capabilities for 6 other large OEMs. So if you go to certain OEMs that are in the market today, Xerox is the engine that builds those things. So 2 different set of dynamics. One was how do you integrate common companies, get cost out, but also grow the manufacturing capabilities. The other one was how do you grow an IT solutions business? And both of them have different capital allocation. Both of them have both a different investment, and both of them have very, very different communications to the street in terms of how you communicate the integration of the two companies.
How do you approach M&A from the desk of the CEO of a major publicly traded company?
I always said, and as you go through due diligence and as you go through looking at a potential acquisition, there's the business model, which is the very specific mechanics of the financials and the potential of growth, potential of synergies. But there's also a very important part around the culture of it. And a lot of companies and a lot of acquisitions fail because of the culture. When I say culture, the management teams have to work together. They have to actually have a common vision and have to have common goals of being successful. So one of the things that I've always looked for as we think about M&A targets and as you think about putting two companies together, can these teams work together? Can they actually build something, a common vision, and have common synergies of growth or common synergies of cost out where both teams are incentivized to win-win? A lot of companies, especially big companies that acquire small startups or small, relative to scale, they tend to kill 'em, right? And we see a lot of companies that buy a very, very exciting piece of technology, a very exciting set of business leaders, and they just kill it because they try to put the bigger mother company on top of a smaller company. And the reality is they haven't, and they've stopped the growth and the entrepreneur spirit. So culture is very important. People are very important. The vision, the common vision, how you're going to execute. And then there's an empowerment. One of the things about entrepreneurs is they are not limited by some of the things that a large public company is limited by. They have a much different risk profile. They have a much different tolerance for risk. Large companies have to narrow that risk and have to have a much smaller profile in terms of risk tolerance because they've got a lot more to lose. And so those two worlds coming together are extremely important and how you navigate through that.
I have a friend, Sam Davidson, CEO of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, who asked me to ask you a question, so I get to do
Sure.
that, and I'm pleased. He said, "At Xerox, how does a company that iconic stay innovative, and what was the CEO's role in that?"
Yeah. Well, when you've got such a rich history, over 100 plus years of incredible history, a culture of innovation, a culture of driving the workplace, and really did. When you think about Palo Alto Research Center, which was an asset of Xerox, right? Develop the mouse, develop, what you see is what you get, develop part of iconic software and operating systems, was part of the original team that helped build and drive a lot of the technology you see around networks today. And so when you've got that type of innovation, when you've got that type of culture, you've got to preserve it. And by the way, it's got a global reach and a global set of attributes around what it means to be inside of Xerox. Having said that, those same attributes, you cannot survive the next 100 years unless you change and change dramatically as technology change and as the world changes. And so It's a balance of keeping the good part and the things that are very important, and then it's driving the set of urgency that says, "We can't keep doing things this way." So simple example, if you look at an R&D cycle inside of the printer world, you're talking 3 to 5 years. Think about that in the AI world. 3 to 5 years is just feels like forever.
Yeah,
And so how do you go from 3 to
Jurassic
5
period.
years, how do you go from 3 to 5 years on a R&D cycle to literally 3 to 5 months? And in some cases, literally 3 to 5 days where we're seeing AI impact, what's happening inside of entrepreneurs and inside of enterprises. So that shift is very important. And as a CEO, you've got to balance that, not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and make sure that you respect, honor, and understand all the great things that got the company to where it is, but also driving a sense of urgency around, hey, we've got to change. And I don't think there's an industry today, I don't think there's a company today that's not being driven or at least challenged around digital disruption and what has happened in the world today.
Yeah, on the day that you resigned, Xerox, reaffirmed the full 2026 guidance that you were, responsible for putting in place. What do you make of that signal?
It just says the strategy was right. It says that, the execution, the management team is comfortable and confident that the guidance that we had put out previously, they are going to hold to it and they see a path to getting it there. So I found it, as a reassurance that what we were already doing was working. Obviously, the first quarter was extremely good for the Xerox team and the management team. They need to continue that and continue to execute. But it reaffirmed that the strategy was right. And goes back to the earlier conversation, in a private world, we would have been very, very pleased with the previous quarters because we saw the signs of where we were heading and we saw the signs of the strategies working. Unfortunately, it just takes some time to actually hit the P&L and L and hit the public world.
Wow, after such an incredible, I mean, a lot of people would say the spectacular run of CIO, COO, CEO, major company, bigger turnarounds, a couple of real challenges as well. Um, you know, you're moving into this AI consultancy after so much success. What do you see happening in AI? What are you super excited about? And how are you going to exercise all this wisdom that you've collected?
Yeah, Mark, I've had 40 plus years of being around technology transformation, whether it's mainframe to client server, what we saw around the web, mobile computing, you pick it. I have never seen adoption of technology as fast as we have seen in just the last year. AI has been around a long time, and people ask me a lot around what's accelerating AI. Well, 2 things. Number 1, the speed of the chip, and we know what's happening with NVIDIA, we know what's happening with the chip, but more importantly, access to data. AI without data is like a cell phone without a network connection, completely useless, right? And so AI having the ability to get access to more data and having the speed in which we can run and build algorithms in and around it is what's actually driving AI today. Also, don't underestimate the network infrastructure about the amount of data that needs to be moving. So, as we start to see 3G to 4G to 5G, and the infrastructure build in terms of the network and the massive amounts of data that you can move, all that combined, it is what is creating the world of AI capabilities today. The other important part is as we start to think about AI and, we can get into the details specifically, AI is really starting to build some of the capabilities that we build in a human workforce. So we can have AI drive RFPs. We can have AI drive sales operations. Before I left, we were having AI look at supply demand and predictability and what revenue would look like. And so there are things that AI can do today, and it only gets more and more advanced every day. I always said in the AI world with my leadership team previous was once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you get on and you see what AI can do, you cannot unsee that. And the world of the possible becomes very, very clear and visionaries to what else can we do? where is the next step? And so for me, I think it's extremely challenging and extremely exciting. AI technology is only going to be limited by leadership and data, period. The technology is there to do enormous amount of things going forward. Where I'm coming in is how do we coach and teach CEOs, boards, executives how to think about AI, where to think about it. How do you think about running centers of excellence? How do you build the capabilities and how do you build it into your infrastructure? And how do you make sure that you disrupt before you get disrupted? Because every company is under pressure, every industry is under pressure. And so you can either sit back and get disrupted, or you can say, I'm going to disrupt myself long before the industry disrupts me.
So the human transition part seems like most of the conversations that I have point at some moment to it's really about managing change, managing people through change, because you're not generally starting with a 0 human company at a
Right.
micro dot. You're really usually working with larger organizations, and the entrepreneur that's running that company has got to both innovate and care for the culture. There's a lot of fear involved.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
There's three aspects of that. The first one is, we see AI in our everyday world. We just don't realize it. And so consumers in general, in large, are adopting AI more and more every day. They just don't see it. Banking applications, Alexa, you pick it. We are interacting with AI in our vehicles, right? And so we're seeing the consumer world getting more comfortable with AI as it provides value. So you think about, I come home, I say, Alexa, order dog food for me today. Alexa, what's the weather? Alexa, right? We're very comfortable with those things. Why? Because they provide value. They make things easier. They change our lives in ways in which it makes it very convenient. So the first thing to realize is that employees are already interacting with AI in very, very different ways. But you got to remind them, are you okay going to the car and saying, hey, take me to the laundromat or take me to wherever it is? We're all comfortable with that because it provides easy and it provides very convenient ways of doing things. Bring that inside the business. How do we make employees' lives easier? Everybody is always questioning whether it's AI or employees. No, it's and. How do we use AI to make employee jobs easier? How do we stop working 40 hours and 45 hours and we get it down to 35 hours and 30 hours because we got assist and we could do things simpler and easier? And so AI works inside of the human world. And one of the things that I've always said is as you build AI agents, they're a part of your human resource tools of capabilities. So the HR team should own your AI agents. They have capabilities, they have certain sets of skills, they have certain requirements. Before you go and recruit, how you train differently, AI is part of the workforce. And when you think about it that way, now you start to integrate, just like you integrate any end to end process, any function. So you think about finance today, whether it's audit, whether it's receivables, payables, AI plays in that entire procure to pay process. How does it hand off to people? How does it give more intelligence and more help to people? And how do we make it where AI is a tremendous assist? Think about AI in healthcare. You got oncology, you got somebody that's looking at, whatever their records are of their history of their patients. Now multiply that by a million and use AI to bring millions of data points as opposed to 1,000 data points to an individual, then an individual can make a decision around what is the best care for this particular cancer type. That's game changing. And that's where I talk about AI assisting and helping and bringing us incredible insights so that we can make real world decisions as human beings.
My friend Brandon shared a piece of advice recently. Dress so that if someone dressed up as you for a costume party, everyone would know it was you. Now, that's not entirely about clothing. That's about identity, about showing up fully. My wife Jenny and I are leaning in on this concept, both in our personal lives and now in a little startup we call Happy Overall. We're making overalls, each one is made to order as a wearable canvas for art. Overalls that are comfortable, durable, and expressive. We're sourcing soft, 100% cotton. We're partnering with designers and with local seamstresses who love the artistry of a well-crafted piece of clothing. So check out happyoverall.com to see pics and see if anything resonates with you. Fully you, and it'll happen every time you reach for them. If you want to be part of the first run, join our waitlist at happyoverall.com. Another thing I want to dig into a little bit is the idea of failure. I think that entrepreneurs uh, are super consumers of failure. We pay for other people's mistakes and we learn from them and we want them to learn from them. And we want to perpetuate that learning across the organization because it's just more efficient, it costs less, right? You had spoken about the Nortel bankruptcy. This is like a $300 billion company that went from that number to 0 in 6 seconds flat.
Yeah.
And what did you learn? I mean, I wanna know what you've learned from
Mm.
that as an example of failure and how it's informing you today.
A couple of things on the Nortel bankruptcy. Number one, the speed in which a bad strategic decision can take down an enterprise. It just, it was an area where, less than 6 months, financial crisis hit. We had a pension payment due, a variety of things, just perfect world, perfect set us back. All right. I think today in a lot of the enterprise risk management that is now built inside of audit committees and in companies would have prevented that a little bit. I don't say totally, but I think it would have prevented a little bit because we were seeing better dashboard headlights on some of the things that were coming. So the first thing is how quickly a deterioration can accelerate. Number one. Number two, I think a little bit of, and this is all technology companies, we're a little bit arrogant about what our own technology can do,
Mm,
and we do not believe we can be displaced. All right. There are many companies, the IBMs of the world, the HPs of the world, you know, AT&Ts of the world had superior technology in their labs and didn't let it come out of their labs because they never thought that they would get disrupted by whatever the company was, right? I remember, sitting inside of HP and having conversations around the cloud, having conversations around at the time ServiceNow, HP had their own software products. And it is very difficult from the inside in to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Throw your own product out and say somebody else is better or something else that's coming is better. And I think that's what's happening today. And you'll see that a lot in the AI world today. If you start to take a look at, okay, can I really be disrupted? Nah, that'll never happen. Next thing you know, 6 months later, there's a startup, it's growing, and it's already causing you problems in your industry. And so that's probably the biggest challenge that I saw and learned from Nortel. When you are successful, when you have built something, you mentioned a $300 billion market cap that was at Nortel at one time. They were the darlings of the telecommunications industry.
yeah,
They were the leaders, all right? Remember, the Ciscos of the world never existed, and all of a sudden, now a couple of major mistakes, Nortel goes bankrupt, and it opens the door for a lot of the other players that were in there. By the way, there was another Canadian company called what? BlackBerry,
oh,
had the
yeah,
same challenge, all right? Great technology, fantastic technology. But that's not where the consumers were moving, and they were so confident that they owned the enterprise, they can never be attacked
yeah.
from something like an iPhone. That's never gonna impact my BlackBerry world, and the reality is, you know what happened.
So, in the AI comparison, one thing that AI obviously does is it helps us make tactical decisions faster. It helps us evaluate data faster. And I think people can also deploy AI in strategic decision making. But you can never outsource understanding. You really have to use it as a tool and still keep that people are calling it the human in the loop.
Yeah,
But the reality is, we just have to understand where we're going. We have to drive a strategy. So if you are driving a strategy, AI can help accelerate that into the wall if it's a bad strategy, right? That's a part of the lesson of Nortel, and you
yeah,
apply it today. AI needs to be driven by great strategy. What is great strategy, Stephen? From a desk, from the multiple levels of desks that you've held, what do you boil it down to? What is great strategy?
yeah. The first thing is there's a misnomer around today companies have 3 to 5 year strategies and they don't change. You got to be flexible within that context of your strategy to be able to change. I will tell you, many CEOs out there 24 months ago didn't talk about AI, didn't think about it. There isn't a boardroom today that AI is not a topic of conversation. How we use it, where should it be? How do we build it into our products? How are we going to get disrupted? How does it change our go to market? How does it change whatever it is? So you think about the big financial firms that in order to get a big financial firm, they used to go after individuals who had $1 million to be able to invest, and we could take and we can provide an advisor to you. That doesn't scale when you got somebody who's going to invest $1,000. Well, if I've got an AI agent that has all of the knowledge of everything that I provide to that $1 million client, and I can provide that to somebody at $1,000 with an AI agent with no human intervention, that's a totally different value proposition. By the way, we're seeing that as some of the fastest growing sectors in both insurance and in financial advisories, because we could take all of that data, all that experience, and now we can go to consumers that we were never able to reach because it wasn't economically feasible. But with AI, I now can do that. All right. And so you're starting to see significant shifts in some of these companies in terms of where they can grow because they can reach consumers that they've never been able to reach before. So when we talk about strategy, the ability to be able to adopt and be able to move inside of your strategic goals globally. You're never going to change whether I'm a hospital or whether I'm investing in supply chain. Am I going to be in the data center business? The strategy of what business you're in, the strategy of where you're making your investments, the strategy of how you're competing stays the same. But you've got to be very flexible today inside of that strategy to be able to have and be much more nimble. One of the things about AI that, I think is incredibly important to everybody who's listening is you don't do 3 to 5 month projects anymore. You don't do 1 year or 18-month projects. You do weekly projects
Yeah, the
because
sprint is
inside
now the product release.
that's right. Inside of the AI agent, you're learning what we call metadata. You're getting information and feedback real time from the AI agent that you can tweak real time. Right? So, for example, if I've got an AI agent that's doing RFP processing and I do 50 RFPs where it used to take me 2 weeks to do it, I now can do it in hours and I get 50 RFPs that all get rejected. Well, I look at that and I say, why is it getting rejected? How do I tweak the model? All right. What we normally would do is we normally wait for a normal cycle. End of quarter, we look at sales operations. We say, hey, we didn't win these 50 deals. Why? Now it gets changed in terms of the cycle time and tweaking the model to days, literally days. And so AI changes the cycle times of how we think about processes and how we change and adopt on the fly.
You have talked about a fearless operator. What it what is your journey starting in Queens, in your own
Yeah.
words, what's your journey to have, drawn from life's hard knocks and body blows and pulled that forward to the desk that you're sitting in today? How did that make you a fearless operator?
I I was born in South Ozone Park, Queens. I was disowned by my family at 16 years old. Spent many, many, many years just going through garbages and picking out copper and steel so that I can bring it to the junkyard, get a few dollars so I can get a couple of dollars of gas that will allow me to get to a job or get to school, whatever it is. I use that not as, hey, poor Steve. I use that as, if that's my starting point, nobody could ever hurt me. I've been there. Put me in a parking lot. By the way, when I say me, it's my wife and I. I'm married 46 years to my childhood sweetheart. She's been right
Congratulations.
alongside of me. And so you can take my wife and I, put us in a parking lot, take everything away, and we'll be just fine, because you find a way to survive through the years. I didn't grow up in a household or a Ivy League university. It took me, over 10 years to get my 2-year degree, let alone my 4-year degree, working full time, going to school at night. It wasn't 40 hours, it was 60, 80 hours of work and school that you had. And so when you get that type of mentality around you can do anything, then nothing fears for you. Like, so, well, you take my job away. Okay, fine. Right. When you're fearful of your job, or you're fearful of making a decision because you're worried about your financial position or your professional position, it limits you. I always tell people, and I teach it in Northeastern, I say the difference between ideas and innovation is fear. A lot of people have ideas. They're fearful of bringing it forward. They're fearful of investing. They're fearful of changing and stepping out of their comfort zone, whatever it may be. All right. How many times do you come across somebody, Mark, and says, "Oh, I knew that 20 years ago," but you didn't do anything about it. It was an idea. It just sat in your head. All right.
Yeah.
And so fear is probably one of the biggest challenges as we think about leadership, and we think about going from either being an entrepreneur to a successful entrepreneur, from ideas to innovation. Fear is one of those things that hold people back professionally, individually, in terms of their own personal goals, and holds them back in terms of being able to be entrepreneurs and innovators. You will find a lot of entrepreneurs are fearless. So I failed. So what? Keep going. So I failed. Keep going. Okay. Elon, you think Elon cares about failing or what people say about him? He care less.
Yeah, I think his stated strategy is we're just gonna produce more rockets and fail quicker and get faster at recovering and getting better incrementally and learning
Yeah.
that we're gonna have a reusable rocket before anybody else does. I was in a conversation just this week with Anya Rodriguez, who was, one of my season 1 episode guests and does a wonderful business called Journey Track, which is, customer journeys mapping, and she asked me the question, and it was, "Does action cure fear?"
You can wake up every day with a positive attitude or a negative attitude. You could take every situation and say, "Is it an opportunity or should I fear it?" It's how you come to the dance, okay? You take a look at professional players, pick the most recent one in the NBA finals. Nobody but nobody on the Knicks is going to those games saying we're gonna lose. I don't care if they're down 15, 20. It did not matter. They just came with an attitude, okay? And by the way, I think that the Spurs were a much better team from an overall capability standpoint and a talent standpoint. When it got down to the 4th quarter, one team believed, one team got a little bit tight, got a little bit nervous, okay?
Yeah.
And, you grow from that, but that's the reality, right? Good players, good golfers don't say, "I'm gonna miss this putt." They don't even think about that.
Well, there's something I wanted to compliment you on because it's a personal experience for me. Speaking of good golfers, you and I, caught a round at your club, Silverleaf, a number of years ago, and, one of the things that I always appreciated about you was how kind you are and how you interact and interface with people, be it vendors, partners, the rest of your team. I got to see it as a, DHL advisory board member, because my company was doing business with yours, and I got to watch you do digital transformation at DHL and experience it as a customer. But I also got to watch you lead. And one day we're on the golf course, and, both of us are in a very similar lie on the way to, I don't know, hole 13 or something. We had a caddy with us, and I'll never forget this because I was gonna, take 3 feet to the right, and that was the read, man, and I think you were somewhere in there too, and the caddy walks up to us and says, "No, hit it 15 feet over to the right." You and I looked at each other like, "What?" And, I thought you might have drained that putt, if memory's not serving me well, but I remember the complete disconnect of what I could read and what the future required for me to approach a golf shot at that moment. And then both of us surrendered and trusted the guy who knew the green better than us, and it was 16 feet to the right, and a big old loop-de-doo. And I remember celebrating with you. I love the way you treated every person that you have spent time with, and we continued to, celebrate your movements, through Europe and Lenovo and on. Um, but I think it's a fundamental character trait that you as a leader are able to connect with people, that this is what AI can't do. It is what you uniquely can do. You're reading the green. Today, right now, you are reading the green about where to go from the CEO role of Xerox to Soul Consulting. Tell us more about what Soul does. How are you guys reading the green right now?
What we're seeing is companies are challenged with how do they build an AI strategy? How do they implement it and get true value out of it? As I said a little bit earlier, a lot of companies are putting in chat or they're putting Copilot, whatever it is, putting Claude, and they really don't know how to get the value, how to drive the transformational change. So the biggest thing that we do is we help CEOs build a strategy. What's the art of the possible? What can AI do? Can it take a dollar out? Can it drive 3% revenue growth? What is the art of the possible? Then we help them with how do you build a center of excellence and actually drive the transformation internally? How do you build it? How do you implement it? How do you drive change? How do you get the management team bought in both top down and bottoms up? One of the things that we help companies do is think about gamification of AI. If you got
Oh, yeah.
somebody in your business and they're sitting in a call center and the CEO says, I'm going to implement AI, they get nervous. Like, am I going to outsource my job? Let's bring you into the fold and you actually not only use it, but you can actually develop it and we gamify how you can develop it within the context of the company. And so we really try to build and help CEOs build the strategy, build the COE, Center of Excellence, that actually implements it, and then help them. What are the transformational things that they need to think about and do differently? Right. I mentioned HR and AI as a agent part of your workforce. That's a dramatic way in which you think about hiring. It's a
Yeah, it's a complete
dramatically different
reframing.
way around
Complete
how you think
absolute
about
blew me off. Yeah,
your
complete
workforce.
reframing.
Okay. How do you think about shared services in the future? What is shared services? Is shared services 50 AI agents that work for you? It's a different way of thinking. And so we help CEOs develop the art of the process, the art of the possible, help them build CEOs, COEs. And then more importantly, we want to turn it over to you. We don't want to run it. We do not want to own the solution. You have to own it. But it may take 6 months of our resources alongside of you to train you, develop you, get the process in place. Remember, AI cuts across data. It cuts across things like data privacy. It cuts across things like how does the audit team think about what an AI agent is doing? All of those are experiences that Soul brings to every one of these engagements.
Where is risk under assessed, and what are the tools to assess risk that every business owner needs to sharpen up?
I think there's 2 answers to that. One is the risk of doing nothing. That's your first and probably your biggest risk, right? If you sit there and you wait and you do nothing, somebody, whether it's your competitors or a non-traditional competitor, is building something in a garage or somewhere that's going to surprise you very significantly,
Yeah.
okay? So the art of doing nothing is probably the biggest concern that I would have in terms of risk. The second piece of risk is, you can look at AI as something you use inside. But remember what I talked about in terms of the insurance and the finance world. If a big finance company can do it, somebody in the garage can do it. And so if I'm building an AI agent that takes and starts doing recommendations on portfolio management with no people and starts to build on, hey, person out there wants to develop and deposit $100. I don't need $1 million from you. I need 100, but I'm going to get 1 million people to give me $100. Now all of a sudden you got something that's very, very formidable and you're competing against an asset you never even thought about. All right. And so if you're a big insurance company or you're a big financial institution, think about hospitals, the same thing. Right. And so, the risk of not doing anything and the risk of not having an understanding the art of the possible and understanding what can somebody sitting in a garage, and I use that term lightly, but an entrepreneur out there who can disrupt you. And I think that's really where the two biggest risks come from.
Disruption is I mean, gee, if there's 5 most used words in the English language these
Ye
days, it's innovation, disruption, diversity, fear,
Yeah.
AI. What's the question that you were expecting me to ask that I have not?
One of the things that, we see over and over and over again is why aren't companies getting the value out of AI? What's causing that? What's happening? Okay. And I think it gets back to any big transformation. So you take a look at, cloud compute, or you take a look at, SAP and Oracle. Thousands of companies implement SAP and Oracle. Thousands of companies implement cloud solutions, all different results. What's the difference? It's the leadership and the ability to understand how to drive change and take advantage of the art of the possible. All right. You and I saw many implementations of software technology only to create a report and somebody said, I don't believe in this supply demand out of this report. I'm going to do my own voodoo dust and I'm going to put it on top of that and I'm going to do my own inventory management. Or in a sales forecast, sales team puts in a number and puts in a sales forecast and the management team says the sales team is always 60% wrong. They put their own voodoo dust on it. By the time it gets to the CFO, those numbers are so skewed from where the field was, nobody believes in it. So it's not a technology issue, right? It's a management issue, it's a process issue, and it's a change management issue. And that's really where AI comes in very, very significantly because it cuts across all those things. It cuts across, hey, AI recommended to do XYZ. I don't believe it. I'm going to do the old way. I'm still going to do it the way I always did.
The parallel entrepreneur is a study in what I think is coming next, despite whatever disruption and opportunity and how you look at it. There's going to be more entrepreneurs. I think we're going to see a Cambrian explosion in the number of entrepreneurs that are roaming this earth, and that increasingly they will be parallel entrepreneurs, meaning they've got more than one business, more than one revenue stream, more than one company uh, attacking small markets, large markets, micro SaaS opportunities. I think that parallel entrepreneurship will be the predominant form of entrepreneurship in the near future. And I want to explore with my guests how they advise entrepreneurs to move into the future and how you think about leadership as an institutional training and responsibility of the CEO, the founder, the entrepreneur. How do they look into the future and also lead and train leaders?
So start with no matter what you're doing, what problem are you solving? And as I teach at Northeastern, there are really four things that are really important: revenue, cash, profitability, and EPS if you're a public company. That's it. So AI has to be able to impact one of those four. Anybody who has an entrepreneurial solution has to impact one of those four. How do you impact it? And how do you drive value across that? So if I'm a CEO of a major corporation and you say to me, I got this widget and it can do these six things. eh, I got this widget that can save you $300 million. I at least have to pause and listen because I know it's real world value to my shareholders. It's real world value to my employees, right? So make sure you're solving real world problems, number one. Number two, make sure you can measure it. A lot of companies put in solutions and they can't measure. They don't measure the before and they don't measure the after. So they really don't know the effect of, well, how much of it we would have done anyway because the market grew, or how much of it we would have done anyway because we took these four things on employees versus the technology actually drove that. How do you measure it? Have a good baseline. All right. And then the last piece of it is this world is moving so fast. I say today is the slowest change will ever be in our lives.
Mm,
Remember, I didn't say technology, I said change.
change.
Okay. And so if that's the case, then you can look at change in one of two ways. You can look at it as, oh, shoot, I'm scared about what's going to hit me. Or you could say, no, this is a great opportunity. If the world is changing so fast, how do I become the positive side of that change? And so entrepreneurs, multiple companies they're running, how do they adopt and how do they drive and how do they accelerate that change? One of the things I'm finding, a lot of AI startups are calling me and say, Steve, I got this great technology, but I can't get to the CEO desk, or I've got to the CEO desk, but I can't convince him or her that there's real value because they implemented chat or they implemented Copilot and they're not getting the value because you're not talking their language. You're not talking the value prop of what makes a CEO and a CFO sit up and listen, right? And so I agree 1000% with the concept of, you're going to have multiple entrepreneurs trying to disrupt. There's going to be winners and losers. Unfortunately, more losers than winners, but the winners will find a way of driving true value, measuring it and demonstrating that there's true value. I use the oncology case, right? How many different cancer researches and how many different solutions did you save patients' lives because you had this massive AI capability that looked at all the different parameters around an individual? By the way, children with cancer versus adults with cancer versus elderly people with cancer have different dynamics and have different ways in which you treat those particular cancers. We now look at different types of cells around cancer. We now look at different types of other attributes, whether it's around family history, whether it's around blood, DNA, etc. All things now give us insight to how we can try to help and prescribe cures for these types of cancer. It's miraculous. But the more you see the results, because you've seen AI, and I'm making it up, I don't have any real world data, Mark, but if I've got an AI solution that improved the survival rate by 40%, now all of a sudden hospitals and cancer patients are sitting up and saying, no, I want to go to hospitals that have these aids and have access to worldwide data versus just maybe a local hospital data or regional data.
The leader of a company has to constantly study leadership, I think, and
Yeah.
and bring character like your character in your formative years and the challenges and the many, many things that you've overcome or addressed, and you've got lessons from that. So there's leadership lessons. Was there a leadership system, a leadership process, a leadership training imperative? Does that live at your desk as the
Yeah.
CEO and the owner?
Leaders have the ability to make companies and individuals do things that they never could have done on their own. There are different attributes to that. Set a vision that says, hey, where we're going is better than where we are. We may go through some really difficult times to get there, but the vision is right. Okay. The characteristic of leadership is lonely. Why is it lonely? Because you're communicating, you're doing something that the rest of the people never saw. Like running a race when you're out front. If you look backwards, you're gonna lose a race. You just looking forward, all right? And so as a leader of a company, the ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. because by default, you're trying to do something that either nobody else has ever done, everybody on the outside thinks you're crazy, employees are, is this guy good or bad? All right. Being fearless. We talked about fear a little bit earlier. All right. When you're out front and when you're a leader, everybody's taking shots at you. Do you care about that? Or are you going to be committed to the vision that you have? Being authentic. When you communicate a message, do people really think you're a phony? Or do they really think you believe in what you're communicating? Being authentic. And right. So there's a lot of attributes around leadership. The biggest, greatest compliment I have ever gotten, Mark, in my career is when somebody says, I don't want to let you down. That's not about,
Yeah.
I can do a paycheck. That is, you are personally committed to the vision that we set, and anything short of delivering it, you've let me down personally, and you've bought into that. That's a totally different thing than somebody saying, I hit my SLAs or I'm at my quarterly number. All
I'm
right.
killing it on my
I'm
KPIs.
killing it. Okay. And so leadership is an incredibly important part of driving this. All right. You see certain leaders, good and bad, but good leaders, the company, their leadership team will follow them through anything.
And how do you approach mentorship?
Yeah, two things. Very proud that 26 people who have reported to me somewhere in their career got to the C level. Four of them actually CEOs. And so I have always been very, very, very proactive in mentoring and helping people, especially my direct reports. I have told my direct reports, go get another job outside the company because your growth has stopped here. In order for you to grow, you need to go. And I have actually helped them get jobs outside the company because I've taken a personal interest in their own personal development. I also believe in reverse mentorship. This is an interesting concept where you have early career employees that actually mentor you. And that's interesting. You go to somebody who's a new hire or somebody's in early career and say, you're going to be the mentor of the CEO. Like, "Well, what am I going to teach you?" Until you help them understand what their superpower is. All right. The first time somebody said, you need to talk to me on WhatsApp. I'm like, what do you mean? What is WhatsApp? Right. And you think about some of these applications today. And what you learn through reverse mentorship is what the next generation is thinking about how they value, how they want to work, how they want to interact. They have incredible lack of tolerance for mediocrity. We say, and we send an email, urgent, urgent, an email. Think about that for a second. You want to send something to your wife and it's important. You put urgent in an email and that's how you send it. That's how most corporations communicate today. A
Pick up
reverse
the
mentor
phone.
would Yeah, a reverse mentor would say, "This is ridiculous. You give me a laptop, PowerPoint, and email? I don't even know what these tools are anymore."
There's a question I like to ask, which is what's on your nightstand, Steve?
Yeah.
What are you reading?
Yeah, for me, it's a couple of things that I like to read. First of all, I just enjoy reading novels about history. I love reading history and what's going on. One of the things that, I talk a lot about is there is a lack of appreciation of how intertwined and how complex this world is. Nobody truly understands what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz today, what's happening in Taiwan today. How do we get to this China dilemma? Or what is, on and on and on, right? And the reality is, we've got this physical supply chain. Well, we now got this digital supply chain, and it's incredibly intertwined. And so to understand history, to understand how we got to where we are, understand the importance of some of the things that are put in place. Our younger generation doesn't even talk about what is NAFTA? Why is that important to me? Why do I care? Those are all important things as we go forward. All right. And so I love to read novels. I love to read history. And then I spend a lot of time just reading and looking at next generation technology. What are people talking about in terms of technology and some of the things that are going to happen? And, A lot of people ask me, okay, Steve, so what's this AI thing? We talking about it 5 years from now? Probably not. There'll be some other disruptors, not it's going away, but there'll be some other disruptor. You think about some of the things that's being worked in the labs today in terms of some of the chips and some of the capabilities. You and I grew up in the world of Moore's Law where we were all excited. We thought that was going to go forever. The speed of a chip doubling every 18 to 24 months. Woohoo! We thought we knew everything.
Yeah,
Well, guess what? That got blown up, all right, in a big, big way. And so some of the things, even the way in which we communicate, over video today, 10 years ago, the networks couldn't handle this. We had the capability, but the networks couldn't handle it. Now we see, 5G, we started to see early stages of what 6G looks like. We started to see what some of the other, ability to have mesh networks and, being able to take iPhones and connect them and create a mesh network, a bunch of iPhones so that we can provide bandwidth and connectivity for sharing information. That's revolutionary. And so 5 years from now, what is that gonna look like? It's an exciting time.
very exciting. If you were to rewind and go back and meet your 20-year-old self or your 16-year-old self, I mean, pick a time in which you wish you could teleport back and offer some advice. What would that be?
Mark, I a lot of people ask me that question, and the answer is surprising. Nothing. I have been so blessed, Mark. Think about I come from Jamaica, Queens, disowned by my family at 16, and I become the CEO of one of the most recognized brands in the world. What would you undo? You know? And
Yep.
so, yeah, look, hey, am I naive to know I made a mistake or two? For sure. Would I like to learn some of the lessons I have now when I was 20? Sure. Okay. But I've been blessed, Mark. I really have. And so, my wife and I, we talk about how do we help people now? I wake up every day, I can make somebody's life better or I can make somebody's life worse. And I don't care whether it's at the grocery store, holding a door, picking something up, giving them a cart, whatever it may be. You can make or break somebody every single interaction. And I like to leave a positive interaction on everything, right? Not because I want something back, but because I've been so blessed, been given so much. And my big thing every day is what can I do to give back?
Well, it is a kindness gene that is authentic. It's real in my lived experience. It is probably one of the things that drove you to the success that you enjoyed was just the way that you interact with other humans. I use the word kindness because I think it is an underused and underappreciated word that actually gets an awful lot communicated. Thank you for the kindness of joining us today on the Parallel Entrepreneur, where we are trying to learn how to do more than one thing at the same time in a messy, beautiful life of entrepreneurship.
Marco, it was my honor and thank you for having me on.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Parallel Entrepreneur. And thank you to our sponsors, partners, and the amazing team behind the scenes who help make these conversations possible. If today's episode sparked something for you, be sure to follow, subscribe, and please share it. Learn about our growing community at parallelentrepreneur.com, including details on our mastermind and companion programs designed to help you align, grow, and thrive across multiple ventures. And of course, gratitude to every visionary guest who trusts us to share their story. Until next time, keep building in parallel.